Good morning from the brutal capitalist dictatorship of Kuala Lumpur. Today I'm doing my 40-minute cardio as usual, so it's going to be another jog and talk video. So, today's topic is entitled, What Unites Us All? Now, what is the common unifying factor of humanity? Well, for many people, that would be race or skin color. For example, due to colorism, the history of colorism in the United States and the history of discrimination against black people, many African Americans essentially see blackness as a solidarity marker. So if you have dark skin, then you are seen as being a comrade. And if you have white skin, then you're not automatically seen as a comrade, but a potential oppressor. And in Malaysia, because of the constant race-based politics, for example, many Malaysian Chinese believe that there must be some Chinese unity between all the Chinese, including the Peranakans, who are actually culturally closer to a Malay than to a Chinese. But some people also believe in a thing called linguistic unity, in which people who speak the same language are all united, regardless of what race or religion they might be. And that was precisely the reason why Dr. Sun Yat-sen made Mandarin the lingua franca, or Putonghua, of China, in order to unite all the ethnic groups of China. And there are others, of course, who believe that religion is the number one uniting factor. That people who are Muslim and people who are Christian or Buddhist and so on will naturally align with people who share the same religious faith. The Marxists believe that class is the primary contradiction. So class, not race, not ethnicity, not even shared language, should be the uniting factor, according to the Marxists. Well, with the exception of the race essentialists, because from my point of view, race is just an artificial construct. I would be a totally different person had I been brought up in India, and I would also be a totally different person had I been brought up in America. I'd be just like an Asian American, God forbid. Race, you see, is only skin deep, so I'm gonna reject that analysis on racial solidarity. I think all the other unity markers actually have a certain legitimacy, in the sense that I do believe that all the other types of unity markers are in some way legitimate. Let's address them one by one. So with regard to language, of course, you probably are aware that before Mandarin became the lingua franca of the global Chinese community in the 1900s, everyone was speaking their own dialect group. The Hokkiens were speaking Hokkiens, the Cantonese were speaking Cantonese, the Peranakans, like myself, were speaking Malay, the Hainanese were speaking Hainanese, and the Hakkas were speaking Hakkas, of course. So you cannot really have one united Zhonghua Minzu, or Chinese consciousness, if everybody is doing things their own way linguistically, because it's difficult for people to communicate. Oh God, wait, I'm running up the hill. It's difficult to form a sense of national consciousness if people cannot even understand what each other is saying, right? So the Chinese nationalists, like Sun Yat-sen, for example, made it compulsory for everyone to learn Mandarin. And here in Malaysia, because we're so fragmented, there are two camps as to which language ought to be the Putonghua, so to speak, of Malaysia. Should it be English, the universal language of business, commerce, science and technology? Or should it be Malay, the national language of our country? Of course, everyone speaks at least a bit of English, and everyone at least speaks a bit of Malay, but not everyone speaks Mandarin or Hokkien or Cantonese or Tamil, so those cannot be unifying languages, because it will take at least a generation to teach everybody Tamil or Mandarin to the fluency that is required for communication in day-to-day life. But being a formerly colonized country by Great Britain, most people in Malaysia at least speak a high beginner level of English. At least, so that's why the Liberals are saying that, well, of course, English ought to be the language that is spoken by every Malaysian, and every Malaysian ought to speak English in a business setting, for example. There should be no cliques, like Mandarin speaking cliques or Malay speaking cliques or Tamil speaking cliques. And on the other hand, you have the Malay nationalists who are going on about how, wait, English is a white man's language. And if you come to Malaysia and you have assimilated into Malaysia, well, Malay ought to be the unifying language. And I understand that people in the Malaysian left today might think that this is a very chauvinistic right-wing Malay take, but I guarantee you it's not. Even Chinese left-wingers like Chin Peng in the 1930s and 1940s would have agreed with this take, that Malay, not English, should be the decolonial or post-colonial language of the land. The reason why language unites people is because if we can't understand what each other is saying, then there's really no point, is there? Now, the Marxian view holds a lot of weight simply from a logical standpoint, because people from the race essentialist community will often try to gaslight you by saying your loyalty should be to your own people, meaning people who share common ancestry with you. For example, if I'm a Chinese, I should be loyal to Chinese. If I'm a Malay, I should be loyal to Malays. If I'm an Indian, I should be loyal to Indians. That's a race essentialist point of view. But I think that point of view is quite a reactionary one, because essentially you have a lot more in common with a working class person of a different culture and a different race than you do with a capitalist of your own race. Believe it or not, yes, you as a Chinese working class person or an average Chinese Malaysian have more in common with a Malay working class person or an Indian working class person than Tan Sri's son or daughter, believe it or not. And the same could be said about a Malay working class person. You have more in common with a Chinese or Indian working class person than you do with Mahathir or his son. Correct? But the race reactionaries, of course, will tell you that your allegiance ought to be people who share the same genetic code as you, because that absolves those people if they happen to be exploiting you. For example, the Zionists will say to the Jews that you have to be loyal to the Jewish community no matter what. And so you are Jewish first and proletarian second. So this will sort of dampen the class consciousness, if you will, in the Jewish working class, and it will make it easier for the Jewish capitalists to exploit the Jewish proletariat, because you're supposed to think that anyone of the same race is automatically your friend. Well, considering that I've had a lot of very nasty and abusive comments from Asian American activists from the Asian American alt-right, like AZN Identity, I don't believe for a moment that race is any more than skin deep, because people don't naturally feel a sense of solidarity to others simply because of their race. I'm going to expand upon this point of view a little bit more in one of my later videos, but believe me when I tell you the bourgeoisie of Malaysia do not care what race each other are. They don't have any animosity to each other, whether they are Malay, Chinese or Indian. Yeah, they just want you to be race conscious as opposed to class conscious, so you don't know who's picking your pockets. But we get now to the point of religion. Now, as Karl Marx once said, religion is the opium of the masses, the soul of a soulless world, the sigh of the oppressed creature, and a heart of heartless conditions. Now, what Marx was basically trying to say was that religion is a way that people cope with the material world because they are very depressed with their material conditions. And rather than making people cope with their material conditions, and it's basically a way that the ruling class uses in order to justify the base of society. Well, this is known as superstructure and base. Religion, you see, is part of the superstructure or the cultural makeup of a region. And it is used to justify the economic base. For example, the religious leaders will say, don't be envious of your neighbor, be happy with what you have, know your place, and don't aspire for more. And this in turn justifies the idea that, you know, you should be satisfied with being exploited by the ruling class. And that would be the economic base, the workers, correct? So, religion, however, has understandably been seen as a source of comfort for hundreds of years by downtrodden people. For example, most of Jesus' followers, for example, were poor and oppressed people from ancient Palestine. And most of Prophet Muhammad's followers were poor and oppressed Arabian people. So the reason why religion appeals to the poor and the downtrodden, with due respect to our religious friends, is because it gives people comfort that that the next world will be better, you know, if you can just put up with this one. And that's why it's no coincidence why rich people are generally less religious than poor people. But yeah, religion ties in very much with class, because people who are religious are usually people who feel disenfranchised in society. Anyway, religion is also a unifier because it involves shared beliefs. And this is where I get to my next point. The way I see it is that it is not a man's race, it is not a man's language, and it is not a man's religion, even, or culture, that defines whether they are comrades or not. That would be shared beliefs. You see, you can take a fellow from another part of the world. Okay, let's just take a fellow from Malaysia, for example. Same race as me, Peranakan, speaks the same languages, English and Malay, and is in the same class as me as well. Is in the educator class. I'm a teacher. Who's to say that we might not hate each other, me and this other guy, just because we're the same race, same language, and speak the same, and have the same religion? You've seen how many vile comments were lashed out at me by the Asian American community. So, what solidarity do those people have with me? So obviously, race, language, and even culture, shared cultural beliefs, do not necessarily guarantee that two people will get along. They might hate each other. For example, the other guy might say that, you know, might be very, very pro-Israel, and I'm very pro-Palestine. Would we get along? But it is the shared beliefs that make people comrades with each other. You could take a chap from Nigeria, for example, totally different culture from mine, who doesn't speak English or doesn't speak Malay. Well, most Nigerians do speak English, I think, but if this fellow believes, as I do, that Palestine should be free from the river to the sea, and that, wealth in a society ought to be equitably distributed, and no one in the society has the right to bully or oppress anyone else, and they should be taken to task if that happens, that person is my comrade, regardless of whether he speaks English and Malay or not, regardless of whether he or she is religious or not. That person is my comrade. Because what binds people ultimately is shared beliefs and shared values. So if you tremble in indignation at every injustice, as I've said, you are my comrade, regardless of what race, religion, ethnicity, or languages you might speak. So you don't even need to be a socialist or not. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.